She thought it was just an old missile silo, buried under farmland, until her wrench hit something that rang like glass. Lyra Mason didn't expect to find a hidden vault, much less one filled with futuristic Teslas that never made it to market. But the billionaire who built it had one final request, and it would change the course of her life forever. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if you love stories about second chances, secrets, and machines with soul, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next is absolutely unbelievable. They told her it was a waste of money. Her mother said it wasn't safe. Her old boss called it a glorified concrete coffin. But Lyra Mason didn't care. She was 29, broke, and running on instinct, the kind you earn from 10 years of fixing other people's busted transmissions and never having the luxury to dream for yourself. So when she saw the listing for a Cold War-era missile silo outside Flagstaff, $1,200 cash only, as is, she didn't flinch. She signed the papers, rented a flatbed, and drove 2 hours through desert backroads with a fire in her chest that made no sense. The place didn't look like much. A rusted hatch sunken into the dirt, surrounded by windswept sand, and nothing else for miles. No fence, no signage. Just a half-buried concrete dome with bolts the size of her fist. She stepped out of her truck wearing worn jeans, a grease-stained hoodie, and steel-toe boots that had seen better years. A lone lizard scurried across the hatch as she approached, crowbar in hand. The wind howled like it didn't want her there. That just made her want it more. She pried the entrance open with a groan of rust and memory. Cold air hissed out. The smell was metallic, old wires, old regrets. Inside, a spiral staircase descended into shadows. She turned on her headlamp, gripped the railing, and started down. 32 steps later, her boots hit solid concrete. The main chamber stretched ahead like the hollow belly of a ship, curved walls lined with peeling paint and forgotten tech panels. She walked slowly, flashlight sweeping across old signs that read, "Authorized personnel, only, and emergency launch instructions." This place hadn't seen purpose in decades. At first, her plan was simple: clean out the junk, install a lift, turn the silo into her own private mechanic's den. She couldn't afford rent in town anymore, and out here, she wouldn't have to explain herself. Out here, it could be hers, just hers. But something was off. Not wrong, just too quiet, too clean. A fine dust layered everything like a time capsule, but beneath it all, the walls weren't crumbling, the air wasn't stale. And tucked near the far end of the chamber was a wall panel that looked newer than the rest. Different screws. A faint red light pulsed from behind a vent. She noted it, but didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, she got to work. Hauled down a generator, ran temporary power lines, cleaned out 3 rooms full of collapsed shelving and twisted cables. Every day she spent underground, she felt something pulling at her, like the silo itself was waiting for her to notice something bigger. She dismissed it, chalked it up to loneliness and adrenaline, until the night she took a wrench to a steel bracket near the south wall and heard it a hollow echo that didn't belong. Like there was space behind the concrete, space that shouldn't exist. She dropped the wrench, her breath caught. She crouched down and knocked again. The sound came back clearer this time, not just hollow, chambered, like a room inside a room. The next morning, she returned with a hammer drill and a determination she couldn't explain. She worked for hours, chipping away at the edge of the bracket. Eventually, the bit punched through. Dust poured into her face. She shone a flashlight through the opening and stepped back. There was glass. And behind it, something shimmered. She didn't know it yet, but her life had just split clean in 2 before the bunker and after. Lyra didn't tell anyone. Not yet. She barely knew what she was looking at herself. The flashlight beam pierced into a narrow space behind the wall, no wider than a hallway, no longer than a single-car garage. But there was glass, clear and unbroken, and behind it, a faint blue glow. She stared through the hole for a long time, one hand still on the drill, the other pressed to the concrete, as if trying to feel a heartbeat through it. Eventually, she went back upstairs, locked the hatch, and sat in the cab of her truck for nearly an hour. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the kind of adrenaline that only comes when you realize you've found something no one else knows exists. Whatever was behind that wall hadn't been disturbed in decades. She could feel it, and she wasn't going to blow it by acting stupid. The next day, she came back with bolt cutters, a portable battery rig, and a custom scope camera she'd used once, while diagnosing a collapsed HVAC shaft in an old Crown Vic. She widened the hole just enough to snake the camera through. The screen lit up. What she saw nearly made her drop it. A tunnel. Smooth-walled. Reinforced. Not concrete. Steel. And lining the ceiling was a row of bundled fiber-optic cables, glowing faintly. Still live. That wasn't Cold War tech. That was new. Or new-ish. Someone had been here after the silo was supposedly abandoned. She followed the cables back through the silo's main chamber, checked every junction box. Some were completely dead, corroded beyond use. But near the generator outlet, she found one that clicked open with almost no resistance. Inside, black and red fiber lines, tagged in silver foil. Tesla labels. Her mouth went dry. It didn't make sense. Tesla didn't build military silos. They didn't do off-grid bunkers, at least not publicly. But the cables didn't lie. One of them was stamped with a name she hadn't heard in years. N Cross. Gen 3 volts. Lyra stepped back, heart pounding. Nathan Cross. Billionaire. Former Tesla futurist. Vanished in 2021, under a storm of rumors, everything from offshore patents to faking his own death. She remembered him from those old TED Talks. Soft-spoken, genius, level weird, obsessed with decentralization. He used to talk about saving tech from the corporations that birthed it. She figured he was all talk. But now, staring at his name on a cable running through her silo, she dropped everything and ran to the wall. This wasn't a random vault. This was his. Her mind raced. What would a man like Cross have buried out here? Old files? A lab? A power system? Or a car? Her heart flipped at the thought. Not just any car. The car. The one he promised in his last public statement. A fully decentralized, encrypted electric vehicle that couldn't be tracked, updated, or disabled by anyone but its driver. It was vaporware. A myth. Or maybe it wasn't. She pulled out her notebook, the one she kept with all her build sketches, wiring notes, and scribbled engine configs, and started diagramming everything. She mapped out the cable routes, guessed where the hidden chamber might lead, and marked where she'd need to drill next. By dusk, she'd opened a new tunnel entrance, just a few feet wide, enough to crawl through. The air inside was still, cold, and clean, too clean, as if whatever system lay beyond was still regulating the environment. She flicked on her headlamp, took a breath, and crawled in. The walls shifted from rough concrete to polished panels. The glow got brighter. Ahead, something curved upward into a soft, square arch. She stepped through and found herself in a room that felt like another world. Steel, glass, light, and against the far wall, lined up like sleeping giants, were silhouettes of sleek, futuristic vehicles, covered in dustless shrouds. Her voice caught in her throat. She wasn't alone in the silo. She was standing in a private showroom, built by a ghost. The room didn't belong underground. Everything about it felt like it had been carved from the future and hidden in the past. Polished steel beams met floor panels that reflected light like water. The ceiling was layered with seamless glass tiles, glowing soft, white. Not harsh like fluorescence, but clean like sunlight without heat. It was cold, almost clinically so, and quiet in a way that pressed against your skin. Lyra stood there for a long time, afraid to move. Her boots left faint prints in the condensation blooming beneath her soles. The room wasn't abandoned. It had been preserved. No cobwebs, no dust, just silence. On the far wall, in matte black letters backlit by gentle LEDs, read, Tesla Innovations, Private Development Bay. And parked beneath that sign, side by side like artifacts in a private museum, were 7 cars, each one under low, transparent canopies. No tarps, no grime. Just gleaming shapes in silver, gold, matte white, and one wrapped in a color she couldn't name. It shifted as she walked, somewhere between iridescent chrome and oil-slick blue. They didn't match anything on the market. Not quite. You could see the lineage Model 3 curves, roadster aggression, but they had evolved. Sleeker lines, wheel wells molded directly into the body. No visible handles, just whispers of what might be access points. One looked like it didn't even have a steering wheel. Lyra took a step closer. Her fingers hovered above the first car's hood. It was warm. Still warm. She stepped back quickly, mind racing. That meant power. A dormant grid, maybe, or a geothermal rig. Something was keeping this place alive. And that meant whatever this was, it hadn't been forgotten. It had been waiting. Then she noticed the pedestal. Dead center in the room. Waist high. Black glass surface. A small icon pulsed at the center. She recognized it instantly. Not a Tesla logo. Something rarer. A prototype interface Nathan Cross had teased once, years ago, during a short-lived press demo before he vanished. Just 3 letters. TEMPO. Technologically encrypted, modular personal operator. Lyra reached out and hovered her hand above the icon. The pedestal lit up. The cars glowed faintly in response. Something was booting, starting. She stepped back as a soft tone rang out like the startup sound of a spaceship in an old movie. Then a voice filled the chamber. Soft, female, unmistakably artificial, but almost kind. Welcome, Lyra Mason. Her knees nearly buckled. She hadn't entered her name, hadn't spoken. The system knew her. User identity verified. Clearance level. Inheritor. System initializing. Please remain present. The pedestal flared to life. A hologram shimmered up a man's face, lean and lined, with quiet, thoughtful eyes and silver at his temples. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her like he was seeing through time. Then the voice said, "This is a message recorded by Nathan Cross, July 8th, 2021. If you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it." Lyra's breath caught. She reached for the pedestal, her fingers trembling just above the edge. "You don't know me yet, but I know you. Or at least, I hoped for you. Someone like you. A mechanic, a builder, someone who still believes machines can mean something more than convenience." His voice cracked on that last word. Lyra's heart pounded. It felt like something sacred was being passed down. "This vault contains the only prototypes of the decentralized electric fleet I never got to finish. The public never saw them. The board buried the patents. They called it fantasy. I called it freedom. And now it's yours, if you want it." The hologram fizzled and paused. The lights dimmed. A low chime rang out as the canopies over each car slowly lifted with a hiss of pressurized air. Lyra stood in the middle of a secret worth, over $165 million, and realized this wasn't just a vault. It was a legacy. Lyra didn't move at first. The canopies had lifted with such quiet reverence it felt more like a ritual than a mechanism. Each car gleamed under the overhead panels, some matte, some glassy, and the one closest to her gave off the faintest hum, not a mechanical vibration, something subtler, electromagnetic. It felt like standing beside a live wire just beneath your skin. She stepped closer to it. The iridescent one, compact but wide-bodied, with 0 seams around the doors. There was no visible interface, no handle, no mirror, no key slot. Just a single glowing edge around what might be the driver's side. Lyra hovered her hand over the curve. With a soft mechanical sigh, the door rose up vertically. She blinked. No sound, no warning, just intuitive access, as if the car already knew she was meant to sit inside. She hesitated only a second before lowering herself into the seat. The interior wrapped around her like memory foam. No buttons, no gear shift, just a seamless dashboard and a flat black screen in the center console. She exhaled, brushing her hand against it. The console lit up. And then, the voice. "Welcome back, Lyra Mason." Tempo interface initializing. She jerked upright. "Back?" she whispered aloud. "What do you mean back?" "Initializing neural link memory. Audio key recognized. Voice match. 92.6%. Proceeding." The screen flashed white, then played a video. It wasn't Nathan Cross this time. It was security footage. Old, grainy, but unmistakable. A young woman, maybe early 20s, walking beside Cross in a hallway. She had a tool belt, oil on her jeans, auburn hair tied back. She looked like Lyra. She froze. Her throat clenched. Her jaw moved, but no sound came out. The girl in the footage turned toward the camera for a moment. Not her, but close. A sister she never had. Tempo prototype development began in 2020, after Nathan Cross's final board resignation. He requested that only 2 people have biometric inheritance access, himself and Avery Mason. Lyra's blood ran cold. That name hadn't been spoken in years. Her aunt, her father's younger sister, the one who vanished when Lyra was 14. She was the family ghost, mentioned in whispers and never at holidays. A rebel, a builder, someone who didn't follow rules, and apparently, someone who had worked for Cross. The footage ended. The voice returned. "You are next of kin. Inheritor code accepted. Fleet access granted. Would you like a full inventory, Miss Mason?" She leaned back in the seat, mouth dry. The cabin around her glowed softly, like it was breathing. Like it had been asleep for decades, and was only now stirring. She whispered, "Yeah. Show me." The console shimmered, revealing 7 icons. Each one represented a different car. She tapped the first. A 3D model spun slowly, an all-terrain model labeled Atlas. The next, a low, bullet-shaped coupe called Whisper. Then Halo. Then Ghost. Then Bolt. Each one accompanied by specs that shouldn't be real. Solid-state batteries. Self-healing nanocoating. Quantum key ignition. Then she reached the last icon. Nova, the one she was sitting in. No specs listed, just one word. Experimental. And then, one final file. Locked. Hidden behind a digital seal. Owner's final request. Audio only. Lyra stared at it. Her finger hovered just above the play icon. "Not yet," she whispered. Her breath fogged slightly in the air. She stepped out of the car, the door gliding shut behind her. The silence of the room returned like a held breath. But everything was different now. She wasn't just a girl with a strange bunker anymore. She was heir to a fleet the world never knew existed, and somewhere in the walls of this place. Nathan Cross was still speaking. Lyra returned to the surface before sunrise. She didn't sleep. She didn't speak. She sat in the bed of her truck, staring out over the quiet desert scrubland as the sky bled orange behind the distant hills. The world above felt smaller now, simpler, almost fake, like she'd stepped out of a dream and woken up into a world too quiet to contain what she'd just seen. She clutched her notebook to her chest, packed with sketches, diagrams, wiring notes, all obsolete now. What she'd uncovered below made everything she'd ever learned feel like child's play. She was staring down the legacy of a man the world had tried to erase, and he'd handed it to her with surgical precision. Later that morning, she returned to the vault and sat back in Nova's seat. The console glowed softly. The locked audio file still waited. She tapped the play icon. Nathan Cross's voice filtered in, this time slower, quieter. Not a public statement, a confession. "Lyra, or whoever finds this, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it to the final launch. That's okay. I knew the odds." The screen displayed a slow rotation of files, schematics, blueprints, patents, each stamped unreleased, do not distribute. This fleet wasn't built to sell. It wasn't meant for dealerships or stockholders. It was meant to disappear, to cede freedom. One prototype in every continent. No updates, no kill switches, no corporate fingerprints. Lyra leaned forward as the data unspooled encrypted firmware, decentralized navigation modules, carbon shell designs that could repair their own surface in direct sunlight. I buried them in places like this, private, quiet, away from cameras. And I told myself I'd launch when the world was ready. But the truth is, I wasn't. Cross paused. His voice cracked for the first time. I lost someone. My son. He was the one who believed this could change things. When he passed, I couldn't face it. So I ran, hid, built in silence. But the plans? They're all here. The screen blinked, shifting to a folder titled Project Continuum. Build them, drive them, share them if you must, but never sell them, never brand them. These machines weren't meant to be bought. They were meant to be believed in. Lyra watched the files scroll for minutes, each one more mind-bending than the last. He hadn't just designed electric cars. He'd reimagined autonomy itself. Each vehicle was an island, a moving vault. You couldn't track it, couldn't stop it remotely. It learned only from its driver. And when that driver passed, it waited for the next one. She sat back in the chair, dizzy. The magnitude of it pressed down like pressure in deep water. Nathan Cross hadn't built the future. He'd built a rebellion wrapped in sleek metal and silence. And now, it was in her hands. The last file in the folder blinked. A single line of text. Nova. Incomplete. Requires driver calibration. Beneath it, a prompt. Begin integration? She didn't hit yes. Not yet. She needed help. She paced the vault for hours, mapping out the power nodes, checking each vehicle's charge cycle, organizing tools. Her old routines gave her something to hold on to, something familiar. But by late afternoon, she knew she couldn't do this alone. That night, in her truck, she pulled out her phone. One by one, she sent messages to people she hadn't spoken to in years. A coder she once dated, who owed her a favor. A retired priest who used to rebuild motorcycles in secret. A YouTube mechanic with a brain for reverse engineering. She didn't say what it was. Just, I found something. You're going to want to see this. And as the moon rose over the Arizona horizon, Lyra closed her eyes and whispered into the quiet, Okay, Nathan, let's build your dream. By the end of the week, the silo had guests. Not many, just 3. But each one stepped through the rusted hatch like they were walking into a chapel made of steel. First was Maddox the hacker. Late 30s, always in a hoodie, always chewing toothpicks. Lyra hadn't seen him in 5 years, not since he helped her bypass a stolen ECU on a classic WRX. He didn't ask questions, just climbed out of his black Civic, scanned the terrain, and said, You weren't kidding. Next came Father Elias, 70 years old, and built like a boulder. He wore a clerical collar and carried a duffel bag full of tools. Before he found the church, he'd spent 20 years at Boeing and another 10 teaching electrical theory at a community college. Lyra didn't need to explain anything. He just smiled, shook her hand, and said, God left some miracles in our hands. Let's get to work. The third was Cassie, a 23-year-old YouTube star whose channel, Fix Her Frame, had 2 million subscribers. She drove 14 hours after getting Lyra's message and brought half her shop in a trailer. When she walked into the vault, she stood silent for 5 whole minutes before whispering, This is holy ground. Together they formed an unlikely crew. A mechanic, a coder, a priest, and a girl who rebuilt frames on live streams. Each had a specialty. Maddox decoded the interface layers in tempo, unlocking hidden modules Cross had buried even deeper. Elias mapped the vault's internal power grid and rewired backup lighting. Cassie cataloged every vehicle, documenting, photographing, and breaking down what she called the gospel of forgotten futures. They didn't sleep much, didn't leave the site. They ordered food to the edge of the property and took turns going up for sunlight. The deeper they got, the stranger it became. Each car had been built with a different driving philosophy. Atlas had terrain response systems that could adapt its suspension live. Whisper was so quiet, it couldn't be heard from 20 feet away. Halo used curved displays built into the glass itself. But Nova, the one Lyra had first entered, remained a mystery. Every time she sat in the seat, the car seemed to respond. Softly, subtly. The steering adjusted to her hand angles. The seat cooled or heated just before she thought to do it. Elias suggested it might be running predictive modeling. Maddox thought it was something deeper. "It's reading you," he said. "Not just reacting, learning you, building a profile." Lyra wasn't sure how she felt about that. She wasn't used to being known. Late one night, after they'd rerouted a failing pressure valve near the battery well, she sat alone in the dark, welding torch still in hand. Sparks danced across the vault, like fireflies. Her boots rested on the concrete. Her face smudged with carbon. The others were asleep in the upper chambers. She was alone with the cars. She looked around and whispered, "You all really waited for me, huh?" The console lights in Nova blinked twice, just once. Then again. Lyra stood slowly, set down the torch, and walked toward it. The door rose on its own. She sat down. The seat adjusted again, not for comfort, but for recognition. Then the dashboard blinked once and displayed a new line of text. "Integration. 14% complete," she whispered. "I didn't even hit start." Tempo responded, "You did. The day you walked through the door." Lyra closed her eyes and leaned back. She wasn't just restoring this vault anymore. She was becoming part of it. It started with a hum. Barely audible, more vibration than sound. The kind you feel in your chest before your ears even catch it. Nova's console lit up without being touched. Its wheels twitched slightly. The chamber lights dimmed, like a stage preparing for a show. Lyra stood next to the open driver's door, eyes locked on the dashboard. Tempo had been calibrating itself to her for days, reading her rhythms, syncing with her voice, tracking her physical presence every time she stepped into the vault. Now it was ready. "Drive mode is operational," Tempo announced softly. "Would you like to proceed with surface ascent?" She hesitated. The others were still asleep. Maddox had warned her to wait. Elias had wanted to bless the vehicle. Cassie had begged to film the first ignition, but Lyra felt it deep in her gut the timing wasn't hers to decide. It was the car's. She climbed in, hands gripping the wheel. It was warm, familiar, and slightly textured like aged leather, though she knew it wasn't. Whatever material it was made of felt alive somehow. The console ran a final check, systems aligning like vertebrae, snapping into place. Surface route prepared. Atmospheric conditions clear. Wind 4 knots west. She took a breath. "All right, let's go." The floor beneath her rumbled gently as the vehicle turned itself toward a secondary tunnel she hadn't even noticed before. The walls opened like shutters, peeling back on a secret only the machine knew. As Nova moved, its systems made no noise, no engine growl, no gear shift, just smooth, uninterrupted momentum. The tunnel angled upward, lined with old missile launch railings that had been repurposed for ascent. The car handled it with ease, tires adapting to the incline, no slippage, no drag. At the top, a final mechanical door unsealed with a hiss, and the night sky broke over them. Stars. Wind. Open land. Nova rolled out into the dark, its undercarriage lights glowing softly against the earth. Lyra reached up and touched the console. "Manual override," she whispered. "Manual granted. Welcome, Lyra." She gripped the wheel, pressed the accelerator, and Nova moved like it had been waiting its whole life to run. There was no lag, no resistance. The acceleration was terrifyingly quiet. The car darted across the dirt field, headlights carving lines into the night. Every turn Lyra took, the car anticipated. Every movement felt symbiotic. By the time she reached the old highway a half-mile down the hill, her breathing had synced to the rhythm of its engine. Except there was no engine. Not in the traditional sense. What she was feeling was motion in its purest form. She pushed it faster. 60, 80, 90, 100. The steering stayed tight, the interior silent. Her heart roared. She laughed out loud, wild and breathless. "You're not a car," she shouted. "You're a miracle." Somewhere overhead, A passing drone caught the moment. Just a single flash of Nova, gliding across the desert road like liquid silver. By morning, that clip would be viral. 100,000 views, then 1,000,000. And questions. So many questions. Lyra didn't know any of that yet. She just drove, past the hills, past the diner where the locals drank bad coffee, past the rest stop where she used to stare at trucks and wish she could build something worth chasing. She stopped only when the sun peeked over the red ridges to the east. She pulled Nova off the road, parked it beside an old broken fence, and stepped out barefoot. The ground was cold beneath her soles. She stood beside the car, watching the light rise. For the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't fixing something broken. She was piloting something whole. They showed up 2 days later. Black SUV, government plates, no sirens, just the low, predatory hum of quiet money. Maddox spotted them first from the ridge above the silo. 3 men in pressed suits, clipboards, and sunglasses. Too polished for locals. Too casual for feds. Lyra met them at the top of the hatch with her arms crossed and her boots planted in sun-baked dirt. The man in front smiled. Not warmly. The kind of smile you put on before saying something that isn't a threat, but is. "Miss Mason," he said. "We've been watching with great interest." She didn't respond. Just waited. "I'm with Tesla's Strategic Innovation Division. You've recently rediscovered a proprietary prototype facility." Lyra let the silence stretch until it made the other two shift slightly. "Rediscovered," she echoed, "is one word for it." The man's smile didn't waver. "We'd like to offer you a solution. In exchange for non-disclosure, Tesla is prepared to compensate you for the contents of this property, absorb the liability, and ensure a smooth transition of ownership. You'd walk away very wealthy, very protected." He handed her a card. Nothing on it but a number and an embossed logo. She didn't take it. "You mean erase it?" she said. "Pretend this place never existed," he chuckled. "Miss Mason, we're offering you freedom, money, security. You could vanish today and never turn another wrench in your life." She took a slow step forward. "I don't want to vanish," she said. "I want to build. Cross didn't die so this place could be boxed up and sold to people who'll never understand it." The smile dimmed, just a fraction. "That's unfortunate," he said. "We'll be in touch." As they left, Cassie filmed them from the brush, then uploaded a silent clip titled, "They're Already Trying to Shut Us Down." It hit 500,000 views in a day. That night, power in the vault cut off. Maddox found a fried relay and a breached connection to the exterior grid. Someone had clipped it clean. Lyra stood in the dark vault, flashlight casting shadows over curved hoods and tempered glass. Nova's lights blinked faintly on backup power, like a heartbeat slowing but not stopping. Father Elias said nothing. Just lit a candle and placed it on the pedestal near the pedestal where Cross's face had once flickered. "We continue," he said simply. They rerouted power through the old geothermal cores that Cross had mapped beneath the silo primitive, slow but reliable. Maddox resecured tempo with encryption so heavy it could have locked down NORAD. Cassie posted tutorials on how to protect decentralized infrastructure. The internet was watching now, and it was choosing sides. Lyra stood outside the vault one morning, staring at the sunrise with tired eyes and blackened fingernails. The suit had been wrong. This wasn't about walking away. This was about standing firm. They had almost missed it. The final car. It was hidden deeper in the vault than the others, behind a secondary door they'd mistaken for a storage bay. It took Elias pressing against the wall at just the right angle to trigger the magnetic latch. The panel opened, with a low hiss releasing a dry breath of air that hadn't moved in decades. Inside was a single car, wrapped in a silk cover the color of ash. No lights, no console glow, just silence. The room was smaller, tighter, its walls lined with photographs. Lyra stepped in slowly. The others stayed back. The cover shifted under her fingers like it was holding its own breath. She peeled it off. The car underneath wasn't like the others. It was older in design, not unfinished, but deeply personal. Chrome trim, rounded fenders, a matte black finish so soft it looked like midnight frozen in steel. There was no label, no console, just a silver plate on the dash that read, "For the dreamer who dares after me." In the glove box, she found it. A letter, handwritten, folded twice. On the back, just one word, Caleb. Lyra opened it with care. The ink had faded, but the words hit with full force. To whoever finds this, this is not a prototype. It's a promise. My son, Caleb, and I were supposed to finish it together. He helped design the bodywork, sketched every line with more heart than I could ever understand. We argued about the taillights for 2 days. He wanted vertical. I thought it was dumb. He was right. He never got to see it finished. I lost him before we turned the key. I buried the car, couldn't look at it. But I knew someone would come. Someone who'd know it wasn't just a machine. This car is his. But it's also yours. Do what I couldn't. Let it see the light. Lyra folded the letter and placed it back in the glove box. Her throat felt tight. That night, the 4 of them spent 6 hours prepping the car. They didn't talk much, didn't film it. No posts, no fanfare. Just 4 sets of hands working quietly under soft halogen light. At dawn, Lyra loaded the car onto the flatbed. She drove alone. It took 3 hours to reach the estate, what was left of it. Cross's home had long been abandoned. The gates were rusted, the lawn wild. But the garage door still worked, groaning open like an old memory. She parked the car inside and stepped back. She didn't leave a note, didn't ring a bell. She just closed the door and walked away. Some things weren't meant to be owned. Some things needed to stay exactly where the dream began. When she got back to the vault, no one asked what she did. They just looked at her differently. And Nova, that quiet sentinel of a machine, lit up as she walked in, as if sensing the grief she didn't speak. Tempo's voice broke the silence gently. Calibrating. Final integration nearing completion. Ready for next phase. Lyra placed a hand on the console. So am I. Because legacy wasn't just what you inherited. It was what you had the courage to set free. 3 weeks later, the vault doors stayed open. Not because the secret was gone, but because the purpose had outgrown the silence. Lyra didn't plan for any of it. She didn't plan for the interviews, or the news segments, or the slow migration of people showing up, engineers, students, old-timers with oil in their veins, and no one left to pass their knowledge to. They came not for the Teslas, but for the why behind them. The intention, the reverence, the reminder that machines could still carry meaning if someone cared enough to build them that way. Lyra formed a non-profit, the Project Tempo Foundation. No brand deals, no IPOs, just workshops, classes, open-source schematics. The first mission was simple: teach. Teach anyone how to take apart an engine, rewire a drive unit, or understand the basic physics of energy and motion. But beneath it all, the message ran deeper. Machines are mirrors, and if we build them with heart, maybe they'll remind us to carry ours better, too. Cassie moved in full-time, turning one wing of the silo into a content studio. Her videos changed overnight. Less about clicks, more about stories. Maddox installed encryption so thick that even Tesla's best couldn't crack the vault's data. Father Elias started holding Sunday morning reflections in the control room. Not sermons, just meditations. And Lyra? She stayed where she'd always belonged, underneath cars, between blueprints, at the welding table. But now she did it with people watching, asking questions, taking notes. Young women who had never held a wrench before. Older men who hadn't been listened to in decades. Veterans, teenagers, dads with daughters. Every time someone asked, "Are you the one who found the $165 million garage?" she'd just smile and say, "No, I found something worth more." Nova remained hers, and yet, not. It still rode like a whisper in her bones. But now she drove it less and less. Not because she loved it less, but because she knew someday it would need to move on again. The car wasn't built to be owned. It was built to be believed in. One afternoon, she stood in the bay where she'd first met Nova. The pedestal still glowed. The other vehicles sat gleaming under soft lights, their systems fully restored, their stories waiting to unfold. The letter from Nathan was framed on the wall beside the original photo of Caleb and the car that was meant to be his. Below it, a simple plaque. This isn't about horsepower. It's about hope. That night, Lyra stood outside beneath a sky so wide it made her chest ache. She didn't think of money, or fame, or even Nathan Cross. She thought of her father, the way he used to nod after she handed him the right tool without being asked. She thought of the way her hands had changed, still calloused, still stained, but now steadier, stronger. She used to think her job was to fix broken things, but that had never been it. Her gift wasn't repair, it was resurrection. And somewhere in the hum of the vault, in the curve of Nova's frame, and in the quiet conversations echoing through concrete, something new was being born. Not a brand, not a business, a movement.